如果我说我真的爱你，谁来收拾那些被破坏的友谊？
男方给了巨额的彩礼44万元。
In Hezi, Shandong, a woman received a high bride price of 440,000 yuan from the groom's family when she got married. This money was subsequently entirely managed and stored by the woman's parents. However, in the years following the marriage, the groom's family fell into financial difficulties. The woman then requested her parents to return the bride price, but they refused. Enraged by her parents' attitude, the woman sued them in court. This action angered and saddened the parents, who described their daughter as an ungrateful wolf despite their hard work raising her. The woman, Ms. Gao, was born into an ordinary family as the only child. During her childhood, she suffered from a mental illness due to certain stimuli. To treat her condition, her parents spared no effort and frequently took her to hospitals, incurring significant expenses, which further strained the already financially challenged family. However, since Ms. Gao was their only child, the parents decided not to have more children and never gave up on her treatment. After more than a decade of persistence, Ms. Gao's condition finally stabilized. Once her condition improved, Ms. Gao reached the age suitable for marriage, and her parents began to worry about her marital prospects. Through a matchmaker's introduction, Ms. Gao met Mr. Zhang. The two had a good impression of each other and decided to get engaged after some time together. At the time of the engagement, Mr. Zhang's family paid 440,000 yuan as a bride price to Ms. Gao's family, a substantial amount at the time. Ms. Gao's parents were very satisfied with this. Given their meager savings due to years of medical expenses for their daughter, they saw this bride price as a significant relief for their financial problems. Ms. Gao's parents used 40,000 yuan from the bride price to prepare wedding gifts, spent 110,000 yuan to build a house, and transferred 50,000 yuan to Ms. Gao's personal account. On Ms. Gao's wedding day, her parents gave her 64,000 yuan as a dowry to take to her new home, and also provided 20,000 yuan as a name-changing fee for Mr. Zhang. However, married life did not go as smoothly as expected. A few years later, Mr. Zhang's family experienced a sudden misfortune and fell into financial hardship. To support their daughter, Ms. Gao's parents took out 60,000 yuan from the bride price for her medical treatments and spent another 2,000 yuan to buy her an electric bicycle. Despite this, Ms. Gao suddenly demanded her parents return the full bride price of 440,000 yuan, claiming that the money rightfully belonged to her. Her parents refused, arguing that their use of the bride price was reasonable and justified. After multiple failed attempts to resolve the matter, Ms. Gao angrily took her parents to court, seeking a judgment for the return of the full bride price. During the trial, the court clarified that the core dispute of the case was whether the bride price should be considered Ms. Gao's personal property. After investigation, the court found that Ms. Gao's parents had indeed spent over 100,000 yuan from the bride price on wedding-related matters, her medical expenses and living costs, all of which Ms. Gao was aware of. Thus, these expenses were deemed reasonable and did not constitute improper management. However, the parents' use of 110,000 yuan from the bride price to build a house, which was not utilized for Ms. Gao's life, was deemed unreasonable and required to be returned. In the end, the court ruled that Ms. Gao's parents should return the remaining bride price to her after deducting the reasonable expenses. What do you think of the court's decision in this case?
彩礼到底应不应该给女儿带回男方家？我觉得呀，是不应该。
Regarding whether the bride price should be brought back to the groom's family by the daughter, I personally believe it should not. What I am about to express may cause dissatisfaction among some men, but I hope every woman listens carefully. During marriage, parents sometimes ask their daughters to bring the bride price and dowry together to the groom's family. This is a tradition, but no matter what, this money must be firmly controlled by yourself, not handed over to anyone, including your husband. The control and use of this money should solely belong to you, as it is not only your last safeguard for life, but also a reserve for the future. Do not, because you feel full of happiness just after getting married, easily take out this money to spend. Married life is not always smooth. It requires a lot of adjustments. During this process, some couples find that they are compatible, while many realize they are not a good match. If one day you discover that you cannot continue, this money will become your last fallback. Especially in the first few years of marriage, you might go through the phases of pregnancy and childbirth. During this period, your child is still young and cannot work, and you might also lose your source of income because you need to take care of the family. The pressure of life during this time is immense, and this money in your hands will be your confidence and support. Without this money, when you have to ask your partner for money, his attitude might disappoint you. For instance, he might question, "Where has all the money I gave you gone?" Such a tone not only hurts the relationship, but also your self-esteem. However, if you have this money, even if he refuses to give you money, you will not fall into a difficult situation. Do not easily believe the various promises your husband makes during happy moments, because only when you truly need to ask him for money will his real attitude be revealed. Without experiencing such scenarios, no one can predict how a person will behave. Therefore, to avoid potential difficulties in the future, we must prepare for ourselves in advance and keep the money firmly in our own hands. If one day the marriage truly comes to an end, this money will become the last reliance for you and your child.
嫁女起诉自己的父母，要求返还男方家给的彩礼。
In a rare case of a dowry dispute, a married daughter filed a lawsuit against her own parents, demanding the return of the dowry given by the groom's family. This case has drawn widespread social attention because dowry disputes have typically occurred between the families of the bride and groom, while it is exceedingly rare for a daughter to sue her parents over the ownership of the dowry. So, how should such cases be handled in terms of the law? Below are the details of the case. The case took place in Taizhou, Zhejiang Province. When Ms. Zhang got engaged to Mr. Lin, Mr. Lin's family gave Ms. Zhang's parents a dowry of 180,000 yuan. Subsequently, Ms. Zhang and Mr. Lin registered their marriage, began living together, and had a daughter. However, after the marriage, Mr. Lin's family faced financial difficulties, and Ms. Zhang repeatedly asked her parents to return the dowry, but they consistently refused. Ms. Zhang argued that the dowry originally belonged to her and was merely being temporarily kept by her parents. She claimed that her parents' refusal infringed upon her legitimate rights and therefore took them to court. Ms. Zhang's parents insisted that, according to traditional customs, the dowry is a monetary gift to the bride's family, and the ownership should belong to the bride's parents. They argued that there was no custodial relationship between them and Ms. Zhang. Furthermore, the court discovered that after receiving the dowry, Ms. Zhang's parents did not host a wedding for her or prepare any dowry for her marriage. After the dispute arose, they only provided Ms. Zhang with some living expenses and gave her an 8,800 yuan red envelope after she gave birth. These are the basic facts of the case. So, who should the dowry ultimately belong to? The Huangyan District Court in Taizhou conducted a thorough analysis of the matter. The court held that the issue of dowry ownership should be assessed by balancing traditional customs with contemporary societal development. From a traditional perspective, dowries symbolize the groom's family's respect, gratitude, and compensation toward the bride's family, suggesting that dowries traditionally belong to the bride's parents. However, from the standpoint of modern society, the compensation function of dowries has diminished, and they are now more about blessing and supporting the newlyweds in establishing their family. Therefore, the court determined that the dowry should be regarded as a gift to the bride's family, and both the bride's parents and the bride herself share rights to it. Based on this, and considering the specific circumstances of the case, the court ultimately ruled that Ms. Zhang's parents should return 100,000 yuan to her. Neither party appealed the verdict, and the judgment has now taken effect and has been fulfilled. This ruling has sparked both support and dissent. As a lawyer, I have a different perspective and believe that the judgment is flawed. The ownership of the dowry should be decided by the bride herself, and the judgment in this case reflects a fundamental error in principle. In the past, dowries were regarded as compensation to the bride's parents because, in traditional society, a married daughter was considered spilled water. Once married, she became part of the groom's family and no longer had any legal obligation to support her parents. Hence, the dowry served as a form of compensation to the parents. However, under the modern legal system, the principle of gender equality explicitly states that a married daughter, like a son,
has a duty to support her parents but no legal obligation to support her in-laws. Under such circumstances, emphasizing the dowry as compensation is clearly illogical. More importantly, in the past, women lacked independent legal status and had to obey their parents in marriage matters. In such cases, parents were the rightful recipients of dowries. In today's society, however, women's status and decision-making power in marriage have been safeguarded, and the decision to marry lies in the hands of the bride. Consequently, the dowry's control should also belong to her. If the bride wishes to leave the dowry to her parents, that is her right, but if she chooses to keep control of the dowry, the law should likewise support and respect that choice. To view dowries as shared property between the bride and her parents not only contradicts legal principles but also violates the modern principle of marriage autonomy. This is my opinion. Do you agree?
女婿多难啊！朋友发过来一个图，我看了之后我大跌眼镜。
In Jiangxi, getting married is truly challenging. Recently, a friend sent me a picture, and I was utterly shocked after seeing it. The picture mentioned a bride price as high as 588,000 yuan, not including other additional expenses. Although this is a phenomenon in certain parts of Jiangxi, it doesn't represent the entire province. However, some people seize on such examples to criticize Jiangxi, making it seem as though the bride price issue here is particularly severe. In reality, the problem of high bride prices exists in many places. As a 36-year-old unmarried man, the primary reasons I remain single are largely due to bride prices and housing issues. This is not just my personal situation. In fact, many people face similar difficulties when trying to get married nowadays. From bride prices to housing, and even to post-marriage family expenses, these matters have been divided into very specific and realistic considerations. Everyone weighs the pros and cons, and reality forces people to become rational and practical. However, this kind of reality needs to be adjusted on a societal level. No one is unwilling to offer more for a bride price, and no one is unwilling to spend money on their partner. The issue is that earning money is genuinely difficult, especially for ordinary people. Such high demands can feel overwhelmingly burdensome. We marry to share our lives together, not to act out some TV drama about a domineering CEO falling in love with Cinderella. These high demands not only make many men like me hesitant, but also turn many women into so-called leftover women. The issues of bride prices, housing, and financial pressures have indeed become major obstacles to marriage in today's society. My parents often urge me to get married, constantly reminding me, "You're already 35 or 36 years old. In a few more years, you'll be 40. You'd better hurry up and get married." But I can only helplessly tell them that it's not that I don't want to get married, but that the real-world demands are too high. Whether through introductions by friends or matchmaking arranged by elders, the women I meet and their families always ask very practical questions. How much is the bride price? What's your income? Have you bought a house, especially whether the house was purchased outright? These questions leave me feeling very frustrated, and it's hard to explain to my parents. Yet my parents often think it's because I'm being picky or have high standards, which makes me feel even more powerless. Nowadays, men have become so humble that it's hard to communicate with women on the same frequency. This communication gap directly leads to many men like me becoming single, while many women struggle to find suitable partners under high demands, becoming leftover women. Therefore, if we want to change this situation and enable more people to enter the halls of marriage smoothly, not only Jiangxi but people in other regions also need to reflect on these issues. Can the requirements for bride prices, housing, and family expenses be appropriately lowered? The key to marriage lies in finding someone with a sense of responsibility and ambition, not in pursuing perfect material conditions. If a man's character and abilities can meet the passing mark, say 60 to 80 points, then consideration should be given, and both parties should give each other a chance. Overly pursuing 100% perfection will ultimately result in men remaining unmarried and women failing to find suitable partners. In the end, everyone might end up growing old alone, unable to achieve the ideal married life.
我不仅反对彩礼，我还支持彩礼入刑。
I not only firmly oppose the existence of bride price but also advocate incorporating it into the scope of criminal law penalties. Regardless of who has paid the bride price, they should be held criminally responsible according to the law. Regardless of who has spent the bride price, they must also bear the legal consequences. We can thoroughly investigate to determine where exactly this bride price has ultimately gone. Who has actually benefited from it? If the bride price was used to buy a house for the younger brother-in-law, then let the younger brother-in-law bear criminal responsibility. If the bride price was spent by the father-in-law on smoking and drinking, then let the father-in-law bear legal responsibility. If the bride price was used by the mother-in-law to buy a gold bracelet, then the mother-in-law must be held accountable. If the bride price was brought back to the new home by the bride and handed over to the husband, then the husband cannot escape legal sanctions. If the bride personally spent the bride price, then the bride must bear the consequences. If the bride price was used for raising children, then when the children grow up, they too should bear the corresponding legal responsibilities. No one should be an exception, and no one should escape accountability. In this way, people can avoid endlessly debating the whereabouts of the bride price. There will no longer be any need to worry about or agonize over who controls or consumes this money. By adopting such an approach, perhaps we can completely put an end to this dispute over bride price and free society from being troubled by this outdated custom.
As the girl just mentioned, if we could include bride price into the scope of criminal penalties, would it completely put an end to all disputes regarding bride price? I disagree with her view. If you think that curbing exorbitant bride prices will make it easy to find a wife, you're mistaken. I believe many men think like this. Before regulating bride prices, the bride price was 200,000 yuan, which I couldn't afford, so I couldn't get married. But after regulation, if the bride price drops to 20,000 yuan, I can afford it, and then I can get married smoothly. This logic sounds wonderful, but reality often turns out differently. Have you ever thought about what the real situation would be after regulating bride prices? Let's assume you have 20,000 yuan. And Xiaoming next door also has 20,000 yuan. Both of you are on the same economic level. So, here comes the question. Who will Xiaohong marry? You foolishly try your best every day to pursue Xiaohong, using all sorts of methods to show your sincerity. Meanwhile, Xiaoming finds a shortcut. He privately approaches Xiaohong's parents and offers the legal bride price of 20,000 yuan, plus an additional 20,000 yuan as pocket money for the elderly. This pocket money is not considered bride price and does not violate any laws. Naturally, Xiaohong's parents happily accept it. Xiaohong's parents think, that's an easy way to double our retirement fund. So, while chatting with your mother during square dancing, Xiaohong's mom casually mentions that Xiaoming's family gave 40,000 yuan. When your mom hears this, she gets upset and thinks your family isn't any worse off. So she directly responds, we can give 60,000 yuan. Thus begins an invisible bidding war between the two families. To win this battle, you are forced to run around borrowing money from relatives and friends, even exhausting all your resources. In the end, through rounds of negotiations, the actual amount of the bride price far exceeds the initial legal limit of 20,000 yuan, even reaching 320,000 yuan. Finally, you fulfill the legal requirement with 20,000 yuan, while the remaining 300,000 yuan is labeled as pocket money for Xiaohong's parents. So, rest assured, even if one day the legal bride price standard drops to 200 yuan, you might still find it hard to get a wife. Because the root cause of marriage difficulties is not exorbitant bride prices, but deeper societal issues. Deeply ingrained preferences for sons over daughters have led to a severe gender imbalance, coupled with human greed. These are the core issues and the real reasons behind the unresolved marriage problems. Do you agree with my opinion? Feel free to leave your comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means so much to us, and we'll continue to provide better content for you. Thank you again for watching, and see you next time.